All right, welcome to our session tonight on marriage and marriage enrichment with Kevin Thompson. Who's excited to be here? All right. Who looked at the AP college rankings? Just came out. Oregon's ranked 2 in the country, y'all. That's pretty amazing. We're pretty excited. Okay, who's a U of O person? Who's a Oregon State person? It's not your year. Love you, but it's not your year. It's never my year. Okay, so we're not here for that. We're here for something entirely different. And I'm just so happy and glad that you chose to be here tonight to just invest in your marriage. The number one relationship in your life, if you're married, is your spouse. And many times, you know how it works. It's like your marriage is just kind of on autopilot, and you're just kind of two ships passing in the night a lot of times, and it's just like the one person that needs the most attention and just that relationship needs the most work and energy and inputs is oftentimes the one that we kind of take for granted. And so it's really good that we can kind of pull together and focus in on just what are some principles, what are some things that we can do to put Jesus right in the center of this relationship. And so Kevin is going to tell us all about that. I introduced him, I think, pretty sufficiently this morning. How many of you enjoyed this morning if you were with us? Yeah, great time. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring up Kevin, and he's going to just bring us into the scriptures and right into the content.
Sounds good.
Welcome, bro.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks so much. Well, it's great to be back with you. What an honor it is to be here. So we're going to have fun tonight. Here's what you need to know about me and my approach to marriage and what we're going to do here. I'm a no guilt kind of person. And so this is not the moment which you're going to come in here and I'm going to guilt you about how you need to go on a date night every single week. And if you don't do that, you're horrible and all those kind of things. It's not that. Literally, here's my goal for tonight. I feel like I am a worker at Costco with appetizers standing on the end of the aisle. And I want to give you a taste of a product that maybe you haven't had before or you've forgotten about in some way. And my hope is that taste will intrigue you enough that you will then go and do some work with it. The taste of the product that I want to give you is this belief that I have that marriage itself is not in the end that complex of what it takes to make it work. Now, I'm not saying it's easy by any means. It's difficult, no question. It's a challenge. It's a sin-filled person married to a sin-filled person. That's difficult in and of itself. But here's what I think. I think we have made it feel like it is such a game of chance, and what are the chances that two people are going to fall in love and all those things. And what we have lost now is kind of what I talked about this morning, and that is what are the basic principles that if we control this relationship, if we do the work we're supposed to do, chances are we're going to have a pretty successful kind of life and a pretty successful kind of marriage. Not that there aren't going to be seasons of difficulty and those kind of things, but by and large, that there is this happiness that is out there. And one of the things I love about married life ministry is to watch as couples open their eyes to the reality of this is much more doable than we realized. So that's my goal for you tonight. So whatever it takes to get you there, if you want to take out your phone and take some notes, you can. If you want to just sit and listen, absorb what's happening, if you want to write those kind of things down, that's a great thing. I do need one thing. I need one man in the room. I would like him in his 30s or early 40s. I want him to have a phone. I want him to love Jesus, his wife, and football. Who is that guy? Do I have that guy anywhere? Oh, the very back. Okay, can you do this while doing the camera? No, is there anybody else? I can't count on you at this moment. Is there anybody else that's going to fit this criteria? 30s or 40s, love Jesus, love your wife, and you have your phone on you. Nobody? Right there. All right, right there. Here's your task. I want you at all times to keep open the football game, and whenever I call on you, you're going to give me the update of the Cowboys score. If the Cowboys are losing greatly, you're going to do it with compassion because you love me. Oh, did I just pick a Packers fan? Who are the Cowboys playing tonight? The Packers. What's the score? Do you know? 7-0. Who? Oh, wow. I already hate my choices. At this moment, already hate my choices. But okay, this is the job that we have. Oh, wow. There we go. Well, all right. Something drew you to the Lord, and I appreciate that, right? So that's what we're going to do here tonight. Here's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to give the basic overview of my book, Friends, Partners, and Lovers, which is kind of our foundational concept of what it takes to make a marriage work. And so Eugene and Joanne, back in Arkansas, they were one of my favorite couples at our church. A fascinating couple. They had never been to church in their 80s. They had never been to church, never had the ability to have children, both of them military. They met in the military, retired, and they bought a house in this little cul-de-sac. When one of our church members moved in next door to them, they built a great relationship with Eugene and Joanne. And then the other house came for sale, and more church members moved into them, and they started having small group in this cul-de-sac, and Eugene and Joanne began to come to this small group. And we eventually called it a cul-de-sac because that's how connected they were. And Eugene and Joanne eventually came to church where ultimately both came to know Christ, both got baptized in their 80s. And they kind of adopted all of us. At the time now, Ellen and Silas were 20 and 17. Now at the time, they were like 3 and 5. And they just loved on the kids so much. They would have been 3 and 6 because that math wouldn't make any sense. They just loved on the kids so much, adopted all of our kids. So one day, they would come by the office. And whenever they came by the office, all our young staff would kind of gather in wherever they were and just garner wisdom from them. And so one day they came in and sat down, and they were sitting there talking. And in my office, all our staff, coworkers came in. And finally, Miss Joanne turned to Eugene and said, well, aren't you going to give him the pumpkin bread? And he goes, me? You brought it. She goes, well, I didn't bring it. And then they had a little spat right there, right in my office, because they'd come to bring us some bread, and they had left it at home. And so she was in much better health than he was, so she went to go get the bread. And so we were sitting there talking. One of my coworkers asked Mr. Eugene, and they were married 70 years. They asked Mr. Eugene, what does it take to be married 70 years? And without hesitation, he said, oh, tell her every day that you love her. I thought, what a great answer is that? So Miss Joanne came back very upset and frustrated, but she gave me the bread. Things kind of calmed down. And somebody asked Miss Joanne, what does it take to be married 70 years? And she, without hesitation, said, oh, tell him every day that you love him. I thought, how cool is that? So about 6 months later, Mr. Eugene had a major medical event. He was put into hospice. Clearly, he wasn't going to make it. So I actually went up one day to say my goodbyes. And so as I was in there, Miss Joanne was very tired. I said, hey, I'm going to be here 45 minutes or an hour. Why don't you run home and shower and do something and get something to eat? And so she felt comfortable. She never wanted to leave him alone. So she left. And so I began to recount these stories with him. And I said, hey, remember in my office you said that? I said, is that really the key to being married 70 years? And he goes, yep, memorize her answers. I wish it were that simple. But it's not. But what's interesting to me is Genesis chapter 2 does give us a basic outline of God's design for marriage. And it's intriguing that it comes in Genesis chapter 2, not in Genesis chapter 3. That means that God designed marriage before the fall actually took place. Now, we know that God in his divine sovereignty knew what was going to take place. And it's almost as though in a protective kind of mode that God looked at on his creation, knowing the choices that we were going to make, and thought to himself, what is the best way that I can help this couple, assist this couple, and protect them in the midst of now being fallen people that live in a fallen world. And God's design is, in fact, marriage, which I would say an aspect of that design is to help reveal to us our need for Jesus, reveal to us our own sinfulness, our own brokenness. You can deny the level of your own fallen nature whenever you're just dating and you're single and you're having a bad day. You can go to your room and be by yourself. You can separate in some way. But once you get married, there is somebody who is with you 24/7. There's no place you can escape. And I don't care how kind and outgoing and loving you are outwardly, in that moment, that other person sees a sinfulness in you that nobody else does. And if that doesn't break you, then just have kids, because now you can't even go to your bathroom by yourself without them knowing, right? So in part, marriage reveals our brokenness, reveals our need for Jesus. And then I think in part, it can provide for us some understanding of who Jesus actually is, of what is this love that is bigger than maybe a love that I recognize that I deserve, and a love that challenges me now to change and to be different in some way. And so in Genesis chapter 2, remember the creation story, right? God creates Adam. He says it's not good for man to be alone. That's a verse that defines marriage, but also goes beyond that we're created now as communal beings. And so he says, I'm going to create a helper fit for him. So think about it, a helper fit for him. And then he parades all the animals in front of Adam, and none of them are sufficient. And so eventually he puts Adam to sleep, then out of the side creates Eve. And then now in this moment, both God and Adam recognize this is in fact the helper that is fit for me. So let's take those two words. First of all, helper. The implication there is that there is a task to be done. That God created Adam and ultimately Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden, and he gave them a job. Theologians call this the cultural mandate. That it's now Adam and Eve's job to take what God has created and to steward over it and to actually make it better. What's an interesting thing is that cultural mandate still exists for humanity. We don't talk about it very much, but this is still very much our real task to take what God has created for us, and we are to steward over it and to improve it, to make it better in some way. And the idea that there's a helper here, that make sure you get this wording correct. This isn't helper. God does not define Eve as the helper like you would look at a little 5-year-old little boy who's going to be daddy's helper now. That, okay, it would be easier for me to do this by myself, but I'm going to include you to make you feel better, and you're going to come in. Instead, the word that's used, helper, here in Genesis chapter 2 is the same word that is used for the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. And the picture that we have here is that God has created something with a unique set of skills and giftings that now complement who Adam is. And in the places that Adam could be weak, could have blind spots, Eve now has strengths and can see. And in the places that Eve could be weak, could have blind spots, Adam now has strengths and can actually see, so that together they have a protective nature for each other and a multiplying impact on their own ability. So helper here is not some secondary position. Helper is very clearly this position of equality, but notice it implies a task that is actually present. And so from this, we get this idea that there's a partnership, that there is this kind of co-creative order where to accomplish the mission that God has given to humanity, we now have to work on this together. So the idea of partnership exists, but helper fit for him. Well, all the animals that God created, paraded in front of Adam, they could be useful to the task. We assume the horse came along, the donkey came along. There are some things that to be done here. So what's so unique about Eve in comparison to all the other animals? And the implication now, what's so unique is this idea of equality. That all the other animals were useful, and God and Adam would use those to help carry out this cultural mandate. But in all those relationships, Adam would be in charge, and they would be the secondary beings. But with Eve, the fit that is there is that there is this picture of equality. This is a co-image bearer of God himself, created equally in the eyes of God, man and woman together in a complementary kind of role and concept. And so from that, we get this idea of friend, that there's an equality that's here. And the imagery, I think, is important, that Eve isn't taken out of the Achilles heel, it's not taken from the top of the head. It is now out of the side to show this equality that takes place. And so automatically you have two characteristics in Genesis chapter 2 of the role that Adam and Eve are supposed to play for each other. A helper fit, so a partner that also has this friendship. And then Genesis chapter 2 ends around verse number 25 with a verse that I've never seen crocheted into a grandma's pillow there at the house, but it says that Adam and Eve, they were naked and they were not ashamed. Crochet that. Give that as a gift. How funny would that be? Hey, Grandma. And so now you have this idea that God has uniquely given this relationship a characteristic and a quality that is going to stand it out from every other relationship that is present, that's going to uniquely bind it together and to express it in a very unique way. And so, 15, 20 years ago, as I'm married to Jenny, I'm trying to figure out, what is my job as a husband? What is it that I'm supposed to do? What does she need from me? This is a question I really should have asked before I got married, but I didn't. Instead, it's in my first decade of marriage, and I'm just trying to figure out, I want to be the best husband I can possibly be to Jenny. What's the job expectation of me? And so any job that you apply for now, you're going to get a sheet of paper that says, here's what's expected of you. Well, what does that look like for marriage? And I think Genesis chapter 2 explains what it actually is. It is the idea of friend, partner, and lover. That is what we need from each other. That is what we need to give to each other. And as long as we are playing those three roles in a healthy way and a growth kind of mindset moving forward, then the marriage itself, I think, will continue to move forward and can do tremendous things. But when any one of those three begin to struggle, there is a ripple effect, I believe, into every other area of life. Here's what I want you to do. Some of you are not here with your significant other. They're working. Various things are taking place. But if you're here with your spouse or you're engaged, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, if you're here with your other person, I want you to stand up right now and I want you to take them by the hand. This is the only active part of the entire night that you have to do. What's the score of the game? 13-2. Did you say 13-2? We might stop this at this very moment. And not. Okay. So here's what this looks. Jenny, do you mind coming up here? Or would you prefer not? Do you mind? Okay. Jenny loves to be on stage. So hey, we're going to end the evening, by the way, by doing Q&A. And so Jenny has her phone with her. She'll be back in the back. She'll have a microphone. She won't come back up on stage. She endures this just because of her great love of Jesus and then secondarily of me. But Jenny's going to be filtering all the questions. And so as you have questions throughout the night, if you'll just take your phone out and text the word marriage to 56316. You don't get charged for these kind of things unless you have some like 1980s phone plan. But you text marriage to 56316. It'll take you to a type form where you can anonymously pose a question. And so we're going to spend the last 25 minutes tonight doing Q&A with all your questions. And so again, we can't trace it back to you in any way whatsoever. You're not being signed up for like Amway or something like that. My apology. I should not have said it that way. I'm going back to California tonight. But marriage to 56316, and we'll end the night with all these questions. It'll be great. Jenny will be filtering all those things. But here's what I want us to do. You stand there hand in hand with your person, and this to me is the great image of friendship. I love this image where Jenny and I are walking hand in hand through life, equally ignorant, right? It's not that I'm way out ahead of her, dragging her ahead. She's not way out in front of me, dragging me. I'm not lording over her. She's not lording over me. We have this relationship of equality as we're walking through life. And I love the idea of holding hands, because the picture of holding hands, it comes from the old days the very old days when you used to shake hands to show that you're not armed. I'm not carrying my sword anymore. I can actually go to shake your hand, right? The gun is not here. Now in Arkansas, it just means they're carrying it on the other side. But it shows that you're unarmed. This relationship is supposed to be a place where you literally set your arms down against each other. And now there is this trust. And so friendship is built on trust, that we know we're going to treat each other's hearts right. And isn't it great to know that whenever you have a healthy marriage, you always have somebody by your side? Now turn back to back. So this now is the picture of partnership. So I get to scan the horizon 180 degrees this way, looking for threats and opportunities. Jenny gets to scan the horizon 180 degrees this way, looking for threats and opportunities. If she needs my attention, she can get it, and we can zone in together on whatever's going on. If I need her attention, I can get it. We can zone in on whatever needs to be going on. But most of our days, I'm taking care of what I've got to take care of. She's taking care of what she's got to take care of. We can communicate about those things. But now in the midst of this relationship, notice, by myself, I can only scan 180 degrees. Now together, we have a 360-degree view of our world. And this is the picture to me of partnership. And partnership now is built on respect. Respect is, I recognize that Jenny is a person of substance. She brings skills and abilities to the table that I simply do not have. She makes me better. I make her better. And there are some things that we're far better if she takes the lead on. There are other things that we're far better if I take the lead on. There are some things that we have to take the lead on together. But respect now is shown that she carries a weight in my world to such an extent that if we were to get in the car tonight and Jenny were to say, hey, look out for so-and-so, guess what? I'm watching out for that person. She sees things that I don't see. There's a value to her voice, unlike anybody else who is actually in my life. She knows me better than anybody else knows me. And that carries with it now a weight because there's such a respect that is there. And whenever this respect begins to flow, we can leverage each other for the well-being of not only the union, but our family and everybody else. And isn't it great to know that in a healthy marriage, you always have somebody who has your back? And now turn face to face. Okay, sit down. Sit down. You're not. What was that? Suddenly all this murmuring is happening. Right? Here's what I love about being face to face. This is now the imagery of intimacy. This is what lovers is all about. That Jenny now sees me in a way that nobody else sees me. I now see her in a way that nobody else sees her. There is an extreme vulnerability, and literally the physical nakedness should just be almost symbolic of what's going on mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And intimacy is now truly built on vulnerability. It's the willingness to expose to one what is keep hidden to everybody else. To let the guard down and say, here's who I actually am. And then in the context of an extreme love for one another, it doesn't mean we excuse faults or mistakes by any means, but instead, this provides a context in which my sin can be exposed, and then with support, we can get to work on it together so that God can heal those aspects of my own brokenness. And now there is this unique connection that is there. And I know something very carefully, I think, is friendship is built on trust, partnership is built on respect, lovers, intimacy is now built on vulnerability. You should not be vulnerable with somebody you don't trust or respect. There is almost a progression. Now, you never move beyond these things. It's not like, all right, we're in the trust phase, got that down. We're in the respect phase, got that down. Now it's vulnerability. We don't have to worry about trust anymore. It's not that. But it is, as a relationship grows, I mean, most relationships began as a friendship, hopefully, that goes into a partnership. And as trust and respect begin to grow, then you can start to be vulnerable with somebody. And then a magical thing happens as you start to be vulnerable with each other. If you handle that right, that actually grows your trust and respect, which empowers you to be more vulnerable. And yet what scares me about our culture in which we live, and if we had more, if I was talking to your college group tonight, I'd spend a lot of time here in which I would talk about that. We currently live in a day in which people are getting physically vulnerable far faster than trust could ever possibly grow, which actually causes your brain to begin to split in some way, because what you're doing in that moment is you're giving your body in a place that your heart knows it can't go yet. So you're training your body to separate sex and intimacy. And so Chris Rock, that great theologian, Chris Rock has spoken explicitly about his failed marriages and how he cheated on his wife and how ashamed he was and how he would do anything to get that back. And now he's trying to live this single life that he doesn't want to live. He wants to be married. And yet he talks about how he had hooked up with a girl. And after they had slept together, the next day they were out at a restaurant. And as they're walking to the restaurant, she tries to grab his hand to hold hands. And he's like, "Are you crazy? We just got to know each other." And it was such an aspect of vulnerability to hold somebody's hand. But he had no hesitation to sleep with her. But that's his body recognizing this is a sign of trust. And I can't trust somebody I just met. And yet it's foolishness that within our society, we start sleeping with people that we don't even trust or respect yet. There's a reason God has designed this the way he has. And so often when a guy like me begins to speak, and especially if somebody's younger is in the crowd, they're like, you're just trying to hold us back and keep us from having fun. No. I want you to have the best possible sex life you can have. But to sleep with somebody be vulnerable faster than what trust can actually grow is going to create a divide within your brain. And literally, it's going to cause such a confusion that as you sleep with somebody, your body floods with oxytocin, which is a bonding kind of chemical that will actually prevent you from rationally filtering out whether or not I should spend the rest of my life with this person or not. And it can become a very dangerous kind of concept. And so trust and respect, I think, are foundational that builds into vulnerability. But by the time you get married, all three of these things should be playing a very integral role in what's going on. And in many ways, I can almost see friends, partners, and lovers kind of like this stand with three legs. That generally speaking, they need to be at the same kind of level of development. And if one of these legs is not working, it will tip the whole thing over. And so friends, partners, and lovers now really is a concept of what a holistic kind of relationship might actually look like. And so it raises the question at this point: friendship built on trust, partnership built on respect, intimacy now built on vulnerability. Which of those three in your marriage, in your relationship, is the strongest? Is the place that you're like, man, we got that. That doesn't mean we're 100%, but it means that is a place of strength for us. And okay, how can you begin to build on that? Now, as you look at that strength of the other two, which one needs to be maybe worked on the most? And is there an area that's weak there? Because here's what tends to happen. If one of those areas gets weak, over time, it will begin to erode into the other areas, and it will have a ripple effect into your relationship. And yet, if you improve one of those areas, generally speaking, it will begin to improve the other two. And ultimately, you want all three of those areas growing in a very meaningful way. I realized this afternoon I didn't do something that I intended to do. And that is this: on my website, changetheodds.com, so you can go to changetheodds.com, we actually have a little assessment, 30 questions, 10 on friendship, 10 on partnership, 10 on intimacy, that you can take in just maybe 3 minutes. And it's completely private. I can't track you in any way, but it's completely private. But it will begin to show you, all right, what's your score in friendship? What's your score in partnership? What's your score in intimacy? And then if your relationship is in a healthy enough spot, you can then kind of begin to compare, hey, what are your scores? What are your answers? Are we on the same page about where our strengths are, about where our struggles are? And then you can begin to look at, hey, where are we strong? Great. How can we build on that even more? And then you might begin to look at, hey, this area, why are we weak in this area? Maybe you know something's happened in your relationship that's caused a weakness that's there. Maybe it's just a lack of intentionality. Maybe it's a season of life. And then you can get to work. There's some great books that are out there that you can read, websites. I mean, intimacy, Google it carefully. I mean, don't be foolish in where you're getting information, but there's some great Christian websites. I can refer and recommend some things on Change the Odds. You can contact me and I can recommend some books that are there to assist you. But it's kind of a good assessment to just kind of get this. And I meant to, before I came here, I meant to have you all take it. That way I could read your scores off. But the truth of the matter is this: I already know what your scores would be, because y'all are no more unique in the same way that I knew I was not going to talk about intimacy with Jenny on stage because y'all were going to murmur to each other because it's been so long since you looked each other in the eye, you stopped paying attention to me. The reason I know that is I've done this all over the country and it happens every single time. People are standing hand in hand, everything's great, they're back to back, and there's a little flirtation that's going on. You turn face to face and I leave the room and suddenly you're zeroed in on each other. That happens all over the country. Why? You and I are not that unique. We're just not that unique. And what are struggles for you are struggles for thousands of couples everywhere, which is why if you have a question tonight, you need to text it in, because whatever question you have, somebody else in the room has the question, they're just not willing to ask it. And then it means in those moments of sheer glee and connection, that's not that unique either. So my 17-year-old son has his first girlfriend, and it's kind of fun to watch. It's kind of terrifying to watch. but it's kind of fun to watch. But he's in that kind of romantic stage, just a couple of months in which he believes at this moment, I have no idea what he's feeling. What he doesn't recognize is what he is feeling is maybe one of the most universal feelings in all of the world, right? And so back in my generation, it would be this idea, you'd be on the phone, right? And you don't want to hang up, and you're like, no, you hang up, and no, I'm not going to hang up. And your dad comes down the hallway, get off the phone, I got to get online. And the younger people are like, what? And you're like, no, Dad, you don't understand what this is like, not realizing everybody understands what this is like. In the places that which we feel most unique, we are actually most normal. It's the times that we feel most normal that we're actually the most unique. And so whatever you're going through your relationship, chances are other people are experiencing it as well. And so instead of looking at marriage and the problems of marriage and the difficulties of marriage as these abstract, unsolvable kind of quandaries that would take the greatest of understanding to ever break down, begin to recognize there are probably some very practical steps that can help you overcome those problems. You just don't have the lived experience to know what they are. So why not reach out to somebody? This is one of the reasons I love counseling, is counselors deal with this on a daily basis. And what feels so unique to us, that literally it's going to be the 8th time they've heard that comment that week. And then so often they can help navigate us to where we actually need to go. So friend, partner, and lover, let's spend kind of some time now breaking down each of these, of what these look like. But let's begin with a concept. First, one more big umbrella topic before we get into the details of what's going on, and that is this. If I had to narrow down marriage advice to one single word, it would simply be intention. Intention. It goes back to what I talked about this morning. You and your spouse are 100% in control of the outcome you're going to experience. Now, the bad news is this. If one of you isn't in it, that one person can destroy it. And if one of you isn't in it and the other person is in it, that one person who is in it cannot save it. It takes both. That's the bad news. But the good news is this. If both of you are willing to do the work that is necessary to get the outcome that you actually want and desire, there is no ceiling on what you can possibly be and what God can do through you if both of you are willing to do the work and will control what you can actually control, which is the state of your relationship. Which means this whole idea of, irreconcilable differences, literally in some ways does not exist. Because all differences can ultimately be reconciled in a healthy and meaningful way if both parties are willing to engage and to do the actual work that it takes. Now, the truth be told, is so often what happens is the work that is required in some relationships is so much that their pain tolerance isn't high enough to endure what they need to experience in order to get on the other side and to have true intimacy. The wounds are too great, the history is too much, that generally speaking, one of them will sometimes opt out before they begin to see the fruit of the work that is actually there. But in the big picture, it is simply this. It is intention. I would say, generally speaking, you have today the status of your relationship, the state of your relationship is directly proportional to the amount of intention you've given to each other and to the work that you're supposed to do. And so if you prioritize marriage, both of you prioritize marriage and learn the skills and build the connection, then you probably have a pretty healthy relationship. If you just leave it to the chance of drift, then you're in serious trouble. Because here's the thing. If you don't take control of your relationship, you're outsourcing it to one of several things. You're outsourcing it first to culture. Do we live in a culture that prioritizes marriage today? No, we don't. We don't. In some part, apart from Jesus, the idea of committing your life to one single person for the rest of your life is sheer foolishness. The idea that in a Philippians 2 kind of way, that I'm going to find happiness now, not in getting what it is that I want and having my own way, but instead submitting my wills and desires to the well-being of somebody else and putting you above myself, that as a pathway to happiness makes no sense apart from knowing the life of Jesus. And so if you just leave it to the cultural mores of the day, that's going to lead you away from the life that you actually want and desire. A second thing, if you don't take control of this, what really will direct your marriage is your own family of origin. So whatever marriage your parents had, chances are you're going to replicate the worst parts of that and reverse the best parts of it. So the worst parts, the parts that you want no part of whatsoever, sometimes are culturally ingrained within you to where you will accidentally repeat them even though you didn't want them. And then the very best parts, you tend not to replicate because you don't maybe understand why it is that they were successful in those areas and you can't learn the same skills. And so oftentimes we will actually reverse the best parts and replicate the worst parts. And so without intention, your family of origin can do destruction to your own relationship unless you're processing and doing the work. And then finally, the third thing that we tend to outsource the state of our relationship to is just this idea of drift. I've never done a wedding ceremony. I've done a lot of wedding ceremonies. I've never done a wedding ceremony where the bride and groom stood before me and they're stating their own vows. The groom says, I promise to give the rest of my life to you. I promise 15 years from now that I'm going to start coming home from work every day at 5:30. I'm going to sit in the recliner for 3 hours and sleep and not talk to you one bit. And eventually at the end of the night, I'm going to get up and go to bed and we're going to have no connection whatsoever. Nobody ever plans for their lives to go that way. And yet how many people repeat that pattern where after a long, busy day, there's no time of connection. He goes his way, she goes her way. And you look at that and you think, well, how could you have a happy marriage? What's happened? They have drifted to whatever was most comfortable in the moment. Here's the thing. If you run into an old high school friend that you haven't seen in a year, and they have gotten in tremendous shape and lost a lot of weight, and you were to ask them, how did this happen? They are not going to say, man, this is the strangest thing. I was driving down the road, and man, I had my Tesla auto drive on, and it just pulled into a workout facility. And I thought, well, I'm here, so I might as well start working out. And then so I worked out. Then I went to the grocery store and I had this cart. Now I guess there's a new technology in the cart. I was headed to the ice cream aisle, but it led me over to the fruits and vegetables, and I just started eating fruits and vegetables. And so I just started exercising and eating right. I just drifted into this weight loss and this dramatic change. It never happens that way. Good outcomes are always the byproduct of a plan, of intention. It was, I got sick and tired of where I was. I got some experts around me. I put a plan together and I got to work. It's intention. You and I will never drift to where we want to be. And yet a good number of people just think that a good marriage is just the idea of, I hope the outcome comes right. I'd say this in friends, partners, and lovers, that most of us think that a good marriage is just the flip of a coin. So we think the average marriage success or failure is 50-50. And so we're just hoping that we pick a good partner, hoping that it works out for us. Oh, we're going to flip the coin and see how this goes. But here's the truth. A good marriage is not the flip of a coin, it's the flip of a will. It's your willingness now to sacrifice yourself and your spouse to do the same thing for the well-being of what's going on, and that takes intention. And one of the reasons I would applaud you all for being here tonight is you're taking intention. You're getting to work on this. Now, here's the tragic news about those who are in the room tonight. Some of you are in the room tonight, you're struggling, and you're here, and you want, this is like a lifeboat to you, and I applaud you for being here. A good number of you are in this room, right, because the football game's no good, because the Cowboys are losing 20-2. 13-2. Okay, see, I predicted another touchdown. I thought, had that happen, I was walking out right there. So, the game's no good. Our relationship is pretty good. Hey, this won't hurt. Let's go. Here's what frustrates me. How many people need to be in this room right now and they're not? And here's what's going to happen. 5 years from now, they might be going through a struggle and they won't understand what's going on, not to realize that it's because 5 years ago they were not taking the small steps of commitment, of intention to create the relationship you want. The relationship you have today is generally the byproduct of the work you did 5 years ago. Which means the relationship you'll have 5 years from now is generally the byproduct of the work that you're doing right now. And so if you will engage and dig in, Jenny, whenever I first took this position at Bayside doing more married life, I was a senior pastor back in Arkansas. And so about 9 months into me doing this position, Jenny said, hey, have you noticed since you started reading all these marriage books how much better our marriage has gotten? I'm like, yeah, I have. It's just the work on this then has a ripple effect into everything else that is going on. So the biggest word I would have for anybody here whenever it comes to marriage is just the idea of intention. What are you doing to intentionally create the relationship that you actually want? So friend, partner, and lover. Let's talk about friendship. We'll talk about partnership. We'll talk about intimacy. We'll take a break in a few minutes so we can. You can go to the bathroom. You can text in questions, those kind of things. So let's talk about friendship now. So friendship is built on trust. And whenever I think about friendship, a few ideas come to mind, specifically in the day in which we live. Whenever you take that assessment online, the very first question on the assessment is a question of attention, which I think attention is the biggest issue of our day whenever it comes to relationships. As I talked about this morning, phones, technology, so many people are spending billions of dollars to draw your attention to what they want. And here's the thing, for every second that YouTube, Google, Facebook, Twitter, X, for Instagram, Snapchat, for every second more of my attention that they get, my family loses it. And Ella and Silas are not spending billions of dollars to create an algorithm to get my attention, but they desperately need it. And the same is true with Jenny. And so the very first question on the assessment is simply this. I regularly have my spouse's attention and can easily get it when I need it. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never, 5 being always, how would you answer that? I regularly have my spouse's attention. Notice I'm not saying 24/7 I have my spouse's attention every day. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is a general flow and pattern in which I have my spouse's attention, that I know whenever I have need, I'm going to have a time in which I can bring this to the table and I can say, here's what's actually going on, and they're going to engage in that moment of what is actually taking place. I regularly have, there's some kind of pattern of predictability to it. I regularly have my spouse's attention and can easily get it when I need it. Meaning if there's a time that I need my spouse's attention, but this isn't the time in which I know I'm going to have it, there are ways that I can signal to them I am in need, and they will recognize that signal, they will drop what they're doing, and they will give me that attention in that moment. Get this. 85% of respondents now, with thousands of people having taken this assessment, 85% say that is not regularly true within their relationship. 85%, and these are church-going people. They love Jesus, they love their spouse, but they will actually say, most of the time I do not regularly have my spouse's attention. And if I need it, I'm actually not sure if I can get it. That's a dangerous place to be. And that is the byproduct, I believe, of all the technology that is taking place in our lives, of which I am the worst of sinners. I'm not in any way claiming, I have this down. It's not that. But to recognize the threat and the danger that is actually there. Friendship is built on shared attention. It's shared attention. Think about it. My guess is most people in this room probably have a friend still from elementary school. Many people still have friends from first grade. And what is it that created that friendship? It was in school. Maybe we were sat next to each other, or we lined up together in class. And now for 8 hours, we suffered together in the midst of this classroom. And that shared attention created a connection that we can still bond with even to this day. And so if you never have that shared attention, then you really struggle to build the emotional connection that you actually want and desire with this other person. And so if you're looking at where your friendship is, and we need now to grow it to some extent, look back, how did you first start to date? Well, you first started to date with this idea of, I want to get her attention, and now I got it, and she said yes. And then what happens? We start planning, how can we go out, and how are we going to spend our time? We're going to go on this walk, and we're going to go on this movie. And there's all this intention that is built around this idea of attention. We were out with Billy and Christy last night, telling the story of how Jenny and I met. And I just said, basically what happened is I stalked her around campus, right? Like I needed to interact with her because I knew without interacting with her, I had no chance whatsoever. But if I can get an interaction, maybe, just maybe, she'll give me now the attention that I want. And so she heard me give a speech at the college that we were at, and she thought I was too arrogant and said, I'll never go out with that guy. And so I needed a second shot. I needed more attention. Let's see how this can actually happen. But as that relationship began on the idea of attention, so it continues. You and I were created that we need to be seen, loved, and valued. Remember whenever your kids were little and one of you comes home from a trip or from work, and they hear the door open, and with the glee of excitement, they run to you, right? And you pick them up and you toss them around, and then they start saying, Daddy, watch me do this. Daddy, watch me do that. What is that? Now, a child needs the attention of their parents, but notice this. You and I so foolishly think that the reason they need that is because they're small, immature children. The reason they need that is because they're human, and you never outgrow that. Now, I'm not saying that whenever your husband walks in from home tomorrow that you run to him and he throws you up in the air. It's gonna send you into traction. But what would it look like this week if you just turned off the TV and sat on the back porch and just had some silence together and began to talk about what's going on? What would it look like if you jumped in the car and just took a drive and had some type of conversation? Where in the calendar is your attention going to intersect to where I know that, hey, I know this is going to happen. For Jenny and I, it's taking walks. That's what's most meaningful to us. It is, 5 days a week, maybe if the weather's good and life isn't too crazy. I'll come home from work and we'll go out and take a walk, and we have a short loop that's about 25 minutes. We have a longer loop that's about 50 minutes. And that's our time to connect. And here's the beautiful thing is, generally speaking, as you're walking side by side, men tend to communicate far better. It's not uncommon at all for a wife to say, hey, my husband really won't talk to me. How can we improve that? And then I'll just explain. Women tend to talk face to face. They go out to the restaurant, they sit down, they have coffee, and they talk face to face. Men tend not to talk that way. Men talk side by side. In the golf cart, in the duck blind, they might be back to back. There's true partnership in the duck blind, right? You better have respect for whoever has the gun behind you, right? And so sometimes the encouragement I'll give to women is, look, get in the car and go for a drive. Go for a walk. Get side by side and see if he doesn't start to open up in a way that maybe he won't face to face. And if you use that intention of attention, it can begin to build your friendship to some extent. But then notice this. It's not just that I regularly have my spouse's attention. It then says, I can get it if I need it. It then means that we must have some ability to make what John Gottman calls a bid for attention. So Gottman, is kind of the secular expert on marriage. He's up in Seattle, wrote 7 Habits for Making Marriage Work. Brilliant book, everything that Gottman has done. And so John Gottman talks about this idea of bids of attention. Here's what he says. He says, in every relationship, we will make bids of attention, which what we're asking to do is asking our spouse or significant other to say, hey, look at me. In what's going on, what I'm experiencing, what I'm dealing with, what I'm struggling with, look at me. And in order to do that, we actually have to make some kind of bid, like a little kid in school raising his hand to ask the teacher a question. We have to do that with each other. And Gottman says in a really healthy marriage that what happens is they become what he calls the masters of recognizing a bid for attention, in comparison with those who are no good at it, and he calls them the disasters. And notice what he says. That if you let's say you make 10 bids of attention to your spouse. This could be anything from, hey, honey, hey, what do you think about this? Could you help me with that? A phone call, a text, whatever it is. You make 10 attempts. The masters respond about 7 out of 10 times in a positive way. So about 70% of the time, healthy couples, when their spouse makes a bid for attention, they will drop what they're doing, zero in on what their spouse is saying or doing, and then return back to their work. The masters do that 7 out of 10 times. The disasters only do it about 3 or 4 out of 10. And so a majority of the time, what the disasters are saying is, I'm going to ignore you, therefore you are not important to me. I'm not going to see you. So notice what then happens. then if I'm in a disastrous relationship, I get trained that I better not make a bid for his or her attention because I don't want to be rejected. So the disasters actually start making less bids for attention. Meanwhile, the masters feel the value of the connection. So they think, you know what, if I make this bid, chances are they will respond. And even if they don't, I'm going to write a positive story because most of the time they do, which makes me more likely to ask for some type of attention. But here's the encouragement. Notice it's not 10 for 10. Notice it's not anytime your spouse asks for attention, you have to give it to them. That's impossible, right? So imagine I come home from work, Jenny's cooking after she's worked, she's now cooking and trying to get everything done at the exact right time. And I walk in and I make a bid for her attention. And I say, hey, honey, let me tell you about my day. Well, she doesn't have time for that at that moment. I could destroy all the work she's done with dinner. And so in that moment, she may not give me attention. Let's say another example. There are other times it's not just time, it's just not going to like. So I'm watching the Arkansas game yesterday, and hypothetically, and we're losing by, the spread was only 45, and we lost by 46. No, I'm sorry, the spread was 4.5. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. And so our wide receiver breaks his leg in a gruesome way. And the TV says, we're not going to show you this replay. So I'm like, oh, I'm rewinding it. And they go, oh, whoa. Hey, look at this. Jenny's like, no, I'm not looking at that. I don't want to see a guy break his leg. I'm like, no, you got to see, this thing will make you nauseous. Like, you got to see this. Like, in that moment, she is not going to give attention to something that could make her sick. It's not 100% of the time we give attention, but it means more often than not we will. So let me ask you this. Are you a master or a disaster when it comes to bids of attention? I remember when the kids were little, Jenny was out of town. I took her to McDonald's because that's where I like to eat. And so I took her to McDonald's and I saw this elderly couple over to the side. And it was at the time that I was writing Friends, Partners, and Lovers. And I just got to watching them. It was brilliant. Walked in, there's 2 cups of coffee. There were 2 cookies in the center of the table. She's working like the crossword puzzle of the newspaper. He's reading like the business section. And I just began to watch them. And what would happen is he would put down his paper and he'd say, hey, have you seen this story? And she would stop working the crossword and look at what was going on. They'd talk for a minute. Then they'd go back. She'd be working the crossword. He'd be reading the paper, flipping through the paper. And then she would say, hey, what's a 5-letter word for this? And he'd put his paper down for a second. They'd engage over what that word actually was. And then they would get back to work. And they kept on weaving back and forth. This to me was a beautiful picture about what a marriage is supposed to be. They're living their own individual lives. They're bringing the good to each other. They're engaging in a meaningful way. They're giving full attention to each other and then immediately going back. Is there a constant swerving in and out of each other's lives to where you're connecting in a very meaningful way while at the same time living your own actual lives? That is what attention looks like in the midst of a healthy marriage. What does it look like in the midst of a bad marriage? Parallel lives. No real weaving and interacting to where we are adding value in each other's lives and everything that is actually going on. And the next thing you know, our friendship just kind of begins to erode away. Now, let's be honest with who's in the room here. Nearly every relationship begins as a strong friendship. But here's what happens. Kids come along, careers take off, all the demands begin to fill in. We have to figure out how to be partners. Intimacy is a part of our relationship. And for a good number of people in this room, if you were honest with yourself, the weakest part of your relationship is actually your friendship. Why? Because life itself has just kind of stolen it away. The text this morning said, above all else, guard your heart. And yet without some intentional defense and offense in this area, it just suddenly isn't what it once was. Jenny and I are in this beautiful stage. I believe that the moment your youngest gets a set of car keys, you are officially empty nesters, right? Jenny and I are in this beautiful stage where our youngest just got car keys, our oldest is at college, and we're suddenly having this time that we haven't had in a very long period of time. And it's rejuvenating our friendship, which I think we've kept strong all throughout the years, but it's even better at this moment. Why? Because we're in a season in which we get to relish that in so many ways. What would it look like now for you and your spouse to reconnect, to rebuild the very thing where maybe your relationship began? Then what would a healthy, strong friendship actually look like? Friendship now is built on trust, Now notice that, by the way, all three of these could be an entire weekend segment. I'm just kind of giving you an overview, and I'm doing a poor job of running through this as quickly as I could. But this issue of trust is so important, because here's what trust basically means. Trust means that I know that Jenny is going to treat my heart right, and so I can give it to her. She's never going to mock me or manipulate it or use it against me. I always say this about Jenny. Jenny loves me and she's for me. I'm doggedly certain about that. She loves me and she's for me. So everything she says, I now filter through that lens. She loves me and she's for me. And so on a normal Sunday morning, if I get up and I start to walk out of the house, I'm having breakfast, and she looks at me and she goes, "Are you going to wear that?" I think she loves me and she's for me. And I tell her, "No, these are the clothes I'm wearing between bed and whenever I go actually put on my church clothes. And so now I'm going to go change." No, she loves me and she's for me. That here's what, she doesn't want to see me embarrassed. So she's trying to help me in some way. And so I interpret everything she's doing now through that reality of what trust looks like. Now here's the sad news. Trust can be broken by either erosion or explosion. Explosion is the affair is revealed, the addiction comes to light, the big lie is seen. That's an explosion. You have it one day, you don't have it the next. Erosion is just the slow drip of, "I'm not sure you're for me. I don't think I can trust you. You say you're going to do it, but then you don't. And I'm just not sure we're on the same team." Now here's the reality. Whether it's by explosion or erosion, when trust is lost, that is a yellow flag. But here's the good news. Trust can be rebuilt. And whether it's destroyed by explosion or erosion, trust is always rebuilt in the exact same way. It's rebuilt brick by brick. It is a slow, methodical, consistent idea of, I am going to live in a trustworthy manner, and I'm going to show that you can trust your heart with me, and I'm going to assure you that I'm going to treat it right. And if I get that wrong, I'm going to quickly apologize, make amends, and never repeat that mistake again. And if you can do that consistently over time, no matter how big the explosion was, trust can actually be rebuilt. Friendship is built on trust. Partnership now is built on respect. Let's talk 10, 15 more minutes, and then we'll take a break. Partnership now is built on respect. And so what this means is, now we have two different skill sets. So Jenny and I are different people. God has allowed us to come together. Now I want to bring the strengths of who I am. She wants to bring the strengths of who she is. We have to compensate for our weaknesses. We have to recognize some things we're just not going to be very strong at in who we are. But then we do have these superpowers that her makeup and my makeup uniquely come together and gift us in powerful ways that we can make a difference not only in our own lives, but also in the lives of others. Partnership is, in some ways, about raising kids, about paying bills, about how you're going to manage the money, how you're going to take care of the house. There's no question there's all these issues of partnership that you have to figure out. But that is not the end game of partnership. This is the area of marriage that has surprised me the most. Now, 25 years in, partnership sounds like the coldest. Like it comes from an age in which kings and monarchs are coming together and doing land swap deals for the marriages of their children. But that's not what partnership truly is. Partnership ultimately is, what kind of life do you and I want to create together? Let's go create that. What are we going to value? Let's value that. Let's drown out the rest of the world. Let's leverage the well-being of each other now to go after what it is that we want to go after. And ultimately, it's this reality that I wake up every single day with somebody else in this world thinking to themselves, how can I make Kevin's life better? And she wakes up every single day with somebody else in her world going, how can I make Jenny's life better? And together, how can we make our dreams come true? What would it look like if you started dreaming again as a couple? To dream of, all right, where have we been? What has God allowed us to go through? What are the strengths and the weaknesses that we've endured? And now in this season of life, how much time do we think that God has possibly stepped before us? Now, what do we want those seasons to be like? What's the legacy of love that we can leave behind? What's the establishment that we can have? How can we be a root and a foundation in the culture within this church? There's young couples within this church who need to be who have marriage mentors, who are further down the road than they are, to encourage them, to point them in the right direction, who are willing to open up their hearts and say, here's how we failed. Here's how we struggle. You don't have to do that in that way. We need couples in this church that are willing to build into the next generation because as so goes marriage, so goes a culture. And you have that ability, no matter where you've been in the past. As a matter of fact, here's the truth. There are some of you that can far better minister to many of the couples who are in this church than Jenny and I could, because so far we have not gone through these deep, dark seasons of struggle with each other. Maybe you have, and you come out on the other side. So if Jenny and I sit down with a couple who's in the midst of a deep, dark struggle, they're going to look at us and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm going to say, you're probably right, but this couple over here does. And now literally God can use your love and the struggles you've had, His grace to you, to begin to impact other people. You know how you end up a married life pastor? My parents were divorced when I was 4. My dad got remarried to somebody else. They divorced. My parents then remarried each other and were remarried all throughout my elementary, junior high, and high school years when my parents got divorced in college and my dad remarried somebody else. And so what kind of background on marriage do I have? My mama and papa. I dedicate the book to them. They were rocks within my life. A foundation of love. I can't imagine the two of them separated. I always say it this way: my mama was the toughest person I ever met, and my papa was the most tender person I ever met. And together they were inseparable. And that showed me what I want to such an extent, and I'm not trying to be weird here by any means, and don't make any Arkansas jokes. I've been doing a lot of study recently on personality. To my greatest guess, Jenny's personality is my grandmother's personality. That had such a profound impact on my life that I was attracted to it when I saw it. That's the impact you can have as you leverage now partnership for the well-being of each other. But notice what this requires. This requires you now to be unified in some core principles of life. Imagine if you were going to start a business and you were going to have a business partner. What would you want in that business partner? You would want somebody who is going to be equally passionate about the outcome, who's going to work just as hard as you're going to work, who's going to be just as invested in this as you're invested in this. But then beyond that, you're going to want somebody who's radically different than you. If you're a detail person, you're going to want a vision person. If you're an IT person, you're going to want a sales person. You want somebody who looks radically different than you at so many things of life, but you're unified in the core principles of what you want to accomplish. So it is in a healthy marriage. You need to be unified in the outcomes you want, and staying together and flourishing in the midst of marriage and loving each other and leaving a legacy of love and honoring Jesus in all that you do. But then beyond that, the more you actually differ, the greater your potentiality actually is. But you have to have this respect so that you're not irritated by the differences. Instead, you're bonded together by them. So Dan Siegel down at UCLA, he invented interpersonal neurobiology. So the idea with Siegel is our relationships actually rewire our brains. And so he has discovered in part, and he and David Daniels over at Stanford had discovered in part, that there's 3 basic places in your body where a bundle of neurons come together to take in information. And as it takes in information, it can then fire energy for you to respond in a proper way. Obviously, the brain is one of those. There's a bundle around your heart, and then there's also a bundle that is within your gut. And so think about head, heart, and gut. All 3 of those are elements that what it means to be a human experience. We have to think right, we have to feel right, we have to act right. All 3 of those are integrally involved. But when sin entered the world, our makeup was shattered to some extent, and those 3 things no longer work in this beautiful congruence. Instead, they're just a little bit out of whack. And so maybe some of us don't respond with our gut the way we're supposed to. Maybe others of us value our minds a little bit too much. Maybe some of us live in denial of our hearts. Maybe some of us are run by our hearts. Whatever it looks like, all of us are influenced by our head, our heart, and our gut, except all of us will latch onto one of those 3 above the other 2 first. So in other words, if I put your head, heart, and gut out on this, in times of trouble, you're going to reach for one first because you think that's the most likely to lead you to safety. And so for me, it's my head. I believe information is the way that's going to keep me safe, that's going to protect me. I want a certainty, a predictability about tomorrow. I'm driven now by information. Think about this. I'm quoting a neuroscientist at UCLA. I'm talking about John Gottman up in Seattle. All the information I'm bringing to you is this outside source and that idea. It's all concept. I don't think I've told a single emotional story tonight once. I'm driven by my head. Jenny's driven by her gut. It's action. Now, she's smart, clearly. Her heart's involved, no question, but her gut is what drives her. And so it's action, it's activity. It's such an extent 4 years ago, whenever we were looking at moving, taking a job, moving to California, biggest decision of our lives, we'd be out for walks, and I would always ask this question, what do you think? What do you think we need to do? And Jenny would be asking the question, what are we going to do? You know what we never ask? How do you feel? Never even really thought about it. It just doesn't come naturally to us. So she's driven by her gut, I'm driven by my head. Now notice there's a strength that's within that. That if we recognize that we come about these things in different ways, that means she's going to drive me to action where I could languish in my need of information that I'm never going to have enough of. It means that in her speed of acting, I could sometimes rescue her from making kind of rash decisions because I'm going to have all this information. Now, if we don't recognize that we're coming from different places and we're actually there to benefit each other, it can actually begin to irritate one another. And I can think to myself, do you not have any information behind this decision? When clearly she does. And she can think to herself, are you never going to do anything? And we can actually begin to doubt one another. So imagine Jenny and I at our worst. So we're trying to figure something out. And so what am I doing? I'm bringing in information. And I'm quoting this expert and that expert, and I'm trying to say, here's what we should be based on this. And Jenny's over here going, look, I don't care what some guy at UCLA believes. I don't care what some non-believer in Seattle thinks. I kind of know what it is that we need to do. And so my experts aren't working, and so then I quote my absolute favorite expert, and I say, look, I actually wrote the book on marriage. So I think I know. And Jenny then says, no, you wrote a book on marriage that not many people read. I don't think you do now. And so at our worst, we can misunderstand each other and have a lack of respect. At our best, we can recognize, hey, you're bringing in your gut, I'm bringing in my head. Hang on, what about our heart? Let's invite the question in, what do we feel? And then as we begin to intentionally bring our heart into it, it'll train me to bring my heart more into it, even as she's training me to bring more of my gut into it. And as I'm training, as she's already leading with her gut, she's learning how to bring more of her heart into it, and now she's bringing her mind into it as well. And then together, we can begin to leverage in this holistic kind of way a better way to go about it. That's just one example of ways that we differ, that if you don't recognize, it's actually going to frustrate you and limit you, and the very thing that God has put in place to protect you can actually begin to harm you. I didn't bring it tonight because I didn't have printouts. I didn't know how many people would hear. I actually have a little 3-page thing that I have for you to learn how do I develop my heart more individually and as a couple? How do I develop my mind more individually as a couple? How do I develop now my gut more individually as a couple? And so there's this QR code that we have. So what I did, I shot a little Instagram video, and if you will click that QR code, and then down in the comment section, if you will just write 3 centers, and it's in the explanation on the Instagram. So it's the number 3 and then centers, because these are centers of intelligence. If you will click that and just comment 3 centers, tonight it will send you the heart. On Tuesday, it will send you the head. And then on Thursday, it will send you the gut. And you can, over these next couple of days, just begin to process, how do I think I lead? How does my spouse lead? And then what would it look like to develop more of these things? And if you want to, out in the break, if you're struggling to get that, I'll be more than happy to assist you in some way. This issue of partnership now comes down to this issue of respect. And to get respect, we have to recognize the differences that we have and then begin to determine, are those differences something that we actually need to negotiate out of? Or do we need to leverage them to the best well-being? Now notice this, not every difference is something that you just need to appreciate. So if you have a New Testament viewpoint of sexuality and you're married to somebody who is into polygamy, you don't just go, well, we just differ in that. We're trying to leverage that to the best of our ability. It's not that. There are some principles that you have to share in common. But then beyond that, everything else that's not a moral issue, the more different your spouse is, the greater potential for your relationship if you can understand it, appreciate it, and respect it. Then you can leverage it to move forward in some way. All right, here's what I want to do. It's 7:10. I want us to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to come back and quickly talk about intimacy, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So here's what I would like for you to do. If you will text marriage to 56316, I want you to start asking questions. Any marriage question you've got, any question from this morning on Stay in Your Lane, we can include all of those. If you need help on the Instagram thing, I can help you out in the hallway. It's 7:10. We're going to gather back at 7:20. Then we're going to do a session on intimacy, have a Q&A, and then we have to be done by 8 o'clock, because my promise I always make whenever I'm at a church is, if I do not get out on time, I will work children's ministry next week. I am not working children's ministry next week. We will be done at 8 o'clock. So y'all take a break and we'll be right back. So let's talk about sex. So I have a podcast called Change the Odds, so you can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcast. And there's one clip out there, I guess, that they cut with me saying, let's talk about sex, as a preview of what was going on. And so my son, 17, works at our church in our facilities, and it's a bunch of these young guys that clean bathrooms and set up chairs. It's great work. His future wife is going to thank us greatly for the work that he's going to be able to do around the house. But after that clip came out, all of my son's coworkers just began to walk up to him every time and go, let's talk about sex. To the extent that it now drives him crazy, that's the phrase. Hey, what's the score of the Cowboys? He's not here. Oh, he left. Why did he leave? What is it? Oh, wow. What are you eating? 16-13 who? Oh, yeah, that's why he left. I like that. He didn't want any part of that. He's out there praying. Now, do you have a prayer chapel? Is that where he went to at this moment? I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. He was letting me suffer up here with no problems whatsoever. All right. So let's talk about sex for a little bit. Notice something very important here. Friend, partner, and lover. It is not the idea of God honors friendship and partnership the most, and then intimacy is this minor thing that's over there. Here's the thing. I grew up in the church, and this is not what I was taught, but this is what I learned. Recognize the difference. This is not what they were teaching me. This was my interpretation. My interpretation growing up in the Baptist church in the 80s was this: sex is sin, but God overlooks it if you're married. 80s and 90s, right? So the idea, there were two main topics. I was a student in student ministry in the 90s. There were two main topics in the 90s: that you better wait until you're married to have sex, and Jesus is coming back before you're going to be old enough to get married. That was the message. To which literally we begin to pray, Lord, we want you to return, not yet. Don't let this happen just yet, right? And so if we're not very careful in the church, we can send these very mixed messages whenever it comes to sexuality. Out of the kindness of our hearts, we understand the danger of what happens if you get involved and engaged in sexual activity far before you're ready. It can have disastrous consequences in a multitude of ways. And yet what has happened is the church has not promoted sex and sexual intimacy in the way God actually created it to be, in this beautiful kind of expression of the fullness of our human nature and loving another person, and in so many ways, ways that can connect us unlike anything else in the world. And instead, it's no shock to us. Notice this. Where did sin first enter the world? In marriage. And what was the very first byproduct of sin now coming in the world? It was now shame and blame and a sexual covering of each other. Is it any wonder if the very place that sin had its first and greatest impact, if this is why sometimes this is still a difficult topic for us to understand? It's because it goes down to the very core and the root of who we actually are. And yet, if you and I now can, in very healthy, humble, God-honoring ways, if we can begin to redeem this the way God has actually called us to redeem us, it can unite us. And not only that, it can then give us a lasting testimony to everybody else around us. I remember whenever I first took the job at Bayside, I had on a Bayside Marriage shirt, and I went through the line at Chick-fil-A. And as I'm there's probably this 25-year-old girl who was taking my order, and she goes, "Oh, you do marriage ministry?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "That means you're a marriage counselor." I said, No. That we have people for that, but I'm not trained for that." She goes, "Well, help me. What do you do?" And I said, "Well, my dad asked me that question all the time." And so I said, "Hey, have you ever noticed?" I said, "Picture a couple in their 90s rocking out their final years on the front porch of a nursing home. and they've been married to each other their entire lives. Is there any part of you that pities them for what they missed out on? She said, no. I said, I help people experience that. She was intrigued. There is this internal longing now for this connection, this being seen and known and valued and loved and in imperfect ways, but in ways that make us feel more human. And here's the truth. When it comes to intimacy, intimacy is the place where nearly every other marital problem will express itself. Very rarely does a couple actually have a sexual problem. They exist. I'm not downplaying those in any ways. But very rarely does a problem originate in the bedroom. It almost always expresses itself there. And so weaknesses and inadequacies, an inability to be transparent, a failure to build trust or respect, a hindrance to be vulnerable in any way, past experiences from our family of origin of how they talked about intimate issues, past hurts or traumas that could be present within our lives where other people have injured us, all those things now come into the bedroom. Jay Stringer says it this way, that the bedroom is the loudest room in the house, because all the negative voices are expressing themselves there. And yet, if we will actually begin to listen, then our intimate moments can become a place in which God can begin to redeem and rescue us if we truly prioritize this instead of either one, just demeaning it into this sinful kind of sexual behavior where we're expressing ourselves and pretending like it has no meaning in any way otherwise, or where we begin to make it some kind of second-rate thing that's really just not that important. If we were truly spiritual, we wouldn't care about these things. Well, God created you as a sexual being. To live in denial of that or to demean that in some way is not some expression of your holiness. It's some doubt of his true sovereign design over your life. And so if he created this for us, how can we enjoy this to the best of our ability, knowing that nobody's ever going to do it perfectly, enjoy it and experience it perfectly, but how can we do it to the best of our ability? Gottman simply says this. Gottman basically minimizes successful sex to the simplest of forms. He says sex generally comes down to friends who prioritize it. Just friends who prioritize it. So think about friendship. I would say it's friends and partners who prioritize it. But think about what he's basically saying. It's that now if you have this trust with each other, that I know you're being faithful to me and I'm being faithful to you, that we can begin to quiet some of the outside voices. I've dealt with my own trauma, my own past experiences, how my parents talked about it or didn't talk about it. Whatever I'm bringing into the relationship, I've done all the work now to get to the healthiest and holiest place I can with that. At the same time, you've done all your work with my support and encouragement. You've done all your work to figure out what past traumas you might have, inadequacies, wrong expectations, and all those things now come to the table. Then now there is a trust that's there that we are going to love each other to the very best of our ability. There's a trust and respect that's there. And then we say, hey, this is important to God. This should be important to us in every single season of life. Now, it's going to look different across every season, no question. There was a great article in the New York Times maybe a year ago in which it talked about the sexual life of a couple in their 90s. And it began to communicate what their sexual rhythm was like. It was literally once a week. And they would talk about basically all the rituals that they would go to prepare themselves for this moment. I don't think he was still functioning the way he once did and medically could not. And yet they were still having these very intimate moments, even though it looked so dramatically different than it would have whenever they were in their 20s. But here they were still, all these years into marriage, prioritizing this very unique connection. And to the extent that you build a healthy friendship and prioritize it, I think it can be a meaningful aspect. But sex oftentimes is one of the major barometers of the relationship. If the intimacy is really struggling, then most of the time that shows something is wrong with either friendship or partnership. And so maybe it's an erosion of friendship. You no longer feel connected. Well, when you no longer feel connected, that sexual attraction may not be there. Or maybe it's a failure of partnership where I hear this all the time. I'll hear from women all the time that will say, look, I would sleep with him more if he would do the dishes more. And it's just this basic communication of, I can't take care of everything that's going on in my brain with no help whatsoever, and then suddenly walk into the bedroom and feel all intimate with this man that I feel like in some ways is taking advantage of me. So let's say, I talk about this in Friends, Partners, and Lovers. Let's say in one area of your life, your relationship devolves into a parent-child relationship. So what's a parent-child relationship? Marriage is meant for two adults. I'm doing my part, she's doing her part. We're adulting in this together. But imagine if I started treating her like my mom. And so I just expected her to clean the kitchen. I just expected her to do everything. And all the things my mom did for me whenever I was a kid, I'm just expecting her to do all those things, except I want her to sleep with me. That's the most Arkansas thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. That's sheer foolishness. And yet some of us, that's the mindset that we actually begin to have. Now, I think about this back into Arkansas. I got done playing golf one day, and I walked in for lunch. And I was having lunch with this group of guys, but right behind me, this one guy walked in, and he was mad, and he was loud, and he was talking. And he's like, yeah, I got done playing golf yesterday, and we stayed up here and played cards. I went home last night about 11:30, and I walked in expecting an intimate time with my wife. She looked at me, huffed, and went to bed. And he was like irritated by it. And I didn't have the courage to do so, but I thought in my head, I wouldn't sleep with you either. And I have no problem with golf or whatever, but if she's at home and you're up here playing golf, that's fine. But then afterwards you don't go home, you have dinner, and then you still don't go home, you play cards, and you're up all this no communication on a Friday night, she's there by herself. And then you walk in having a sexual expectation of this woman that you've given absolutely nothing to. In what world does this make sense? And yet he couldn't even hear it. And notice this. His complaining was actually his confession, and he didn't know it. He was vocalizing for everybody what was absolutely obvious, but he couldn't recognize what was going on. Let me ask you a very simple question. Would you sleep with you? Acting the way you act, would you engage? Is there any way, doing what you do right now, is there any way you could have wooed your wife or wooed your husband in a dating relationship if you treated them the way you treated them now? If the answer is no, what do you expect? And yet what can happen in a God-honoring way is literally as you're experiencing and growing and learning in this together, there can be such an amazement in the miracle that God has created in the midst of this intimacy that this can actually begin to drive us into more positive relationships and patterns that we're trying to pursue after, because we begin to recognize the magic of who and the mystery of who this other person actually is. Now, I have a book coming out next August, and here's, I'll just explain kind of my sex chapter very quickly, and then we're going to take some Q&A. So make sure you're texting marriage to 56316. But let me just give you a definition of what I think marital success and sex actually is. It is a mutual pursuit of mutual pleasure for the purpose of mutual connection. I recognize I've repeated mutual 3 times, and there's a reason for that. So it's a mutual pursuit of mutual pleasure for the purpose of mutual connection. Notice, the end result of true intimacy is not just an orgasm. It's not just an experience. It's not a climax. It's actually connection. Intimacy is about connection, not climax, right? And so the idea is now I feel seen, valued, loved, heard, understood, and both of us now feel this very deep connection. Well, how do you get that? Well, you get this now through a mutual pleasure, to where it has to be satisfying for both. When sex goes wrong for most couples, it becomes about one person and not both of them. And think about this. If generally speaking, one of you is satisfied and one of you is not, over time, frequency is going to become an issue. And yet what Sheila Gregoire, however you say her name, it's French, I'm Arkansas, I don't do it. But however you say her name, Sheila Gregoire says this: basically, whenever both partners enjoy the experience, conversation about frequency generally goes away. It'll just be nuanced. It'll be just 1 or 2 times a week that the real debate is over. And so show me a couple who's regularly fighting about frequency, and chances are it's more an issue of, is this pleasurable and enjoyable for both, and are they prioritizing it? Well, how do you get that mutual pleasure? Well, now you mutually pursue after that. you begin to figure out how is it that we can bring pleasure, God-honoring, in noble ways, pleasure to each other, and we're both going to have to learn. Here's one of the, I think, the great dangers of just culture and society. We just assume, because lust comes so easy to us, because what hormones do whenever we're teenagers, and we just so naturally feel the idea of attraction, we falsely conclude we better be good at sex. We should be good at sex. Doesn't this just come naturally to us? No. Nothing in life comes that naturally to us. How, and I'm trying not to be crass here in any way, but how in the world could a guy know how to pleasure a woman when he has no experience with a woman's body whatsoever? That's something he has to learn. And conversely, how could a woman do the same? That's something they have to learn. And so if you don't recognize, look, this is going to be a struggle for a little bit. We got to figure this out. In every season of life, as our bodies change, as hormones change, as life changes, we got to figure out what this looks like for us in this season. But if we never understand that, here's what Gottman says. Gottman says that 20 to 25% of all romantic moments actually fail. Meaning, if you're planning on having sex tonight, there is a 20 to 25% chance that your kid's going to get sick, that she's going to have a stomach ache or have a headache, or that work's going to call. But if you don't realize this is just a natural part of the rhythm, that 25% of the time this just doesn't work out for whatever reason, hey, we'll do it tomorrow, then the next thing you know, that becomes a point of contention, and you can feel like your choices are either this. If you're struggling sexually and you don't understand why this could possibly happen, your choices are either this. Either I'm broken or she's broken. Well, neither of those are positive outcomes. Instead, begin to recognize, look, of course this is a difficult process to figure out. Let's make a mutual pursuit after learning. What do I need to do? What are my blind spots? What do I need to do to set the mood? How can I woo the heart of who you are out? And how can you now attract me and lure me in? And that's the whole concept now is literally to woo and pursue, right? So I'm supposed to pursue after the heart and the affection of Jenny. She's supposed to woo me to her. And as I'm pursuing after her and she is wooing me to her, now together we can have this experience. But if it ever becomes one-sided, that becomes difficult. And so what part of this do you need to work on? Again, the book comes out next year, so you can struggle sexually for the next 8 months. Then you can buy The Creation of Us. Available where all fine books are sold. So it's a mutual pursuit. Can we read some good books, some godly books? I can send you to some Christian websites to learn to have these conversations. We're committed together to make this mutually pleasurable. Here's a basic concept. We're 2 minutes away from Q&A. Here's a basic concept. Generally speaking, sex that's good for him may not be good for her, but sex that's good for her is almost always good for him. I don't expect you to tweet that on your church's website, but that's solid material. And so if you will begin to prioritize her experience a little bit more, chances are both of you will be happy. But if it becomes one-sided, specifically if it just becomes about his release, that is not going to be a healthy experience. Both of you pursue after the pleasure of both of you. It doesn't mean it have to mean every single time. Here's what it does mean. Maybe this is why I didn't do the assessment for you. One of the questions on the assessment is, in the average month, both of us have the same amount of enjoyment as each other. Is that generally true, most of the time true, or never true? So over a month, not any given moment. You can have a moment that's more about him or more about her, but generally speaking, over a month, do you generally climax the same amount? I'm guessing that question has never been asked from this stage before, but it was just asked after I danced around it for 20 minutes. Here's the amazing thing about that. All these people taking this assessment. I will have men message me and say, I don't understand question whatever, 27. It's not even possible. It's not. What do you mean it's not even possible? And so it goes to show that in their relationship, they don't even recognize that the woman can enjoy this. Well, look, there's a variety of reasons of why that could be. Not necessarily the fault of the man. But now, what would it look like if the couple prioritized this in such a way to say, you know what, this is one of the places that biblical counseling can be some of the greatest stuff. Some of your quickest return on investment regarding counseling and marriage can actually be with sexual issues. Because so often we're embarrassed to talk about them. We don't know what we should talk about. We can't Google it. You better not Google it. And you don't know what's going on. And you go to a counselor and they can begin to very quickly expose, oh, here's what's happening. There was an abuse in the past that's never been worked through, which really causes her to struggle in the bedroom, and you're not being sensitive toward it. And what would it look like for us to work through that? Or you don't recognize how selfish you're being here, or you're actually giving him the cold shoulder and trying to use sex to leverage something else out of him instead of prioritizing this as a true expression, and you're actually turning sex into a transactional concept that is using him. And we don't recognize how that is playing into our intimacy. A mutual pursuit of mutual pleasure for the purpose of mutual connection. It's friends and partners who prioritize this. Build your trust, build your respect, and begin to learn how to get vulnerable. Okay, let's do some Q&A. Can Jenny have a microphone? What's the score of the ball game?
20-22.
Who?
20-22.
How much time left?
34 seconds in the third quarter.
Oh, if you said fourth quarter, we were putting up on the screen right now. Okay. All right, Jenny, we got 20 minutes. Let's go.
I find it very hard to open up to my partner. How can I break down the barriers I have placed in my own mind? I know that they want me to communicate with them.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we don't have a gender there. No. Okay. So here's one thing that I would do is I would go to them and just confess, hey, I struggle with this. I want us to get to work on it. And now, if you have the type of relationship where you can, now notice, I've just asked you to open up to your partner. Now, if you can't do that, that's okay, no shame. Find somebody in your life that you can, somebody that you truly trust, a friend, maybe it's a counselor, and begin to confide in them of what's going on, and maybe have them assist you to begin to explore, why is it that I can't open up in this way? And it could be that you need to go to a pastoral counselor, maybe CR can help, maybe a clinical counselor can begin to explore, all right, maybe you come from a childhood in which your needs were actually not recognized as a child, so that you do not have the courage to express those because your brain is saying, why would I ever express those? Whenever I was a kid, those were manipulated and taken advantage of. And you're bringing that now into your current relationship. No fault of your spouse's, it's just your own family, it's just your own story that's still playing tricks on you. Now, you need to learn how to work it out. It could be that your spouse at some point in the past has not trusted, has not treated your heart right, has manipulated you, has abused you, has mocked you in some way, and now you're skittish to bring your heart out on the table. Okay, what will it look like to work through a process of forgiveness to ensure that never happens again, but to rebuild the trust and the respect so that you can actually get vulnerable? It could be that you just have a much more shy personality. Okay. Here's one basic question. Does your spouse deserve your vulnerability? And are you confident they will treat it right? If the answer is yes, okay, let's begin to do the work that you need to do to bring them what they actually deserve. You said, I do, and now you're not fully doing. They married the whole heart. Now bring that to them. What's the process and the friends support you need? Now, if you say, you know what, I don't fully trust them, okay, why not? What happened? Let's get to work as a couple now in counseling to begin to say what actually took place here and how can we rebuild that in some way. It's a tremendous question, and now it's a question that deserves an action of some sort.
When I am stressed or anxious, I find myself taking it out on my spouse with the way I respond. I find myself coming across as harsh and not responding in a loving way. What are things I can do to improve on
Yes, you've already done the first step, which is awareness. You see a pattern that is there. It's not healthy. It's not right. All right, let's recognize that. Now, how can we begin to change? So what are the appropriate ways to express the anger, the frustration, the hardness of life? Is it now that you actually need some assistance in what's going on, and maybe they can come alongside, recognize the busyness of what's going on within your life and to assist you to where you feel supported in some way? Is it possible that you have an anxious attachment? attachment. That what you're doing now is you are raising the level of emotion in order to feel seen and heard, because if you don't do that, you feel like they won't see you and hear you. Maybe that's what you had to do as a kid. Do you have some type of avoidant attachment in which you're actually trying to push them away through your harshness? You're trying to protect your own heart. Well, if you have either of those two things, there's easy ways to work on that. I have a book coming out next month, by the way, called Secure Love, that you can begin to look at what is your actual attachment style. One thing within this question and even the previous question, by the end of the year on my website, I've actually created an AI. It's going to be lovestyles.ai. To where it has all my information into an AI system, and you'll be able to voice text into the system that very question. Hey, I can't open up to my partner and I'm being really harsh with them. Why am I doing that? It will begin to ask you questions back. You'll answer it back, and eventually it will work you through, hopefully exposing what it is that's preventing you from being the vulnerable person that you want to be, and then it will give you real steps of how to work through that. So you can look for that maybe in the next 60 days as well.
And what's the name of that website? Because I had questions about that.
Lovestyles.ai. No, it's not.
ChangeTheOdds.com is where they can find the assessment.
My marketing person will tell me which website I need to promote at this very moment.
They were asking about ChangeTheOdds.com.
Okay, ChangeTheOdds.com is where all my information is at this point, yes.
Yes. Okay. In the midst of parenthood with babies and toddlers, sexual intimacy was once very prioritized, but now is scarce. Will this come back full swing again naturally? Or is it something that has to be rebuilt? People say it's a season, but how true is it? Kids are exhausting.
Yes. No. Did you write this question? Are you? Is this? No. So this is absolutely true. So I have a coworker who says, rate your marriage right now on a scale of 1 to 10, and for every child you have under the age of 5, add a point. So there is an aspect of this in which, look, in certain seasons of life, intimacy is easier and then it's more difficult. There is an aspect within this. At the same time, what would it look like in this busy season of life for us to know it's not going to be fully what we want it to be, but how do we still prioritize it to make it the most that it actually can be? What does that begin to look like? And so to have these very real conversations. Here's what I love about this stage. I think most marriages begin as friendship. Intimacy begins to pick up. I really don't think it's until the busyness of either kids and or career that you can actually learn what it means to be partners. This actually is not the book we use in premarital counseling, because truth be told, I don't think they're truly going to understand the partnership until life gets busier for them. But now you're right in the middle of it. So how can we actually develop our partnership better to give both spouses, specifically the woman, a little bit more freedom to think in intimate ways? And then in part, you just got to recognize, look, in this season of life, there are going to be times, and many women's sexual response is responsive in that she's not going to feel desire until she's about midway through the act, and then it comes alive. So there's going to be times in which, look, I'm going to engage in this, not in any way in abuse, not in any way out of manipulation, but I recognize this is important to our relationship, and so I'm going to do my best to engage even when I may not fully feel like it, as long as I can trust and respect him as well in the midst of the process. And what does it look like to prioritize it in this season of life, knowing a beautiful day is going to come in which the kids are going to get old enough that they wake up on a Saturday morning, you're going to come downstairs, strow Fruit Loops all over the floor, turn on Paw Patrol, and go back to bed. That day is coming. You're just not there yet. So recognize it's not going to be the fullness of what we expect, but don't just assume. Don't just assume, it'll naturally come back. Because as soon as you do that, it may not actually do that. What does it look like to prioritize it in this specific season?
What do I do if I feel he shares with his friends, not me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's what I always think about. Your spouse needs to be your first person, not your only person. And especially for men, I think it's important for everybody, but here's what I recognize. Whenever I'm doing a funeral of somebody I deeply love, I make sure I cry before I actually do the funeral. Why? I want that emotion, that raw emotion out. That way, whenever I'm doing the funeral, I might still show emotion, but it will be a secondary emotion so I can be there for the family. Notice that once the emotion is out, what you express the next time will be less emotional. For men specifically, where some of us don't express emotion very well at all, we have to recognize the power of the first telling. And the power of the first telling needs to go to our spouse so that they get the fullness of the emotion. And then our friends can get the second telling, because it's not nearly as important for my buddies back in Arkansas to hear and see me cry as it is for my wife. And so one thing that you can do there is make sure that you're telling your spouse first, and then you can tell everybody else. There are certain things that Jenny needs to be the first phone call for me. Other things she does. Jenny doesn't care what I shot at golf last week and let me walk through every shot. Even if I'm going to get emotional about it, she doesn't care about that part. But the struggles of my heart, what excites me, what scares me, all those things, I have to be intentional to make sure I share with her first so that she gets the most emotional side of it from me, recognizing every telling after that will actually be less emotional.
How do you work on friendship, especially with young kids?
Yeah, so you take all the advantages that you possibly can. This is a great example, right? You got 2 hours of children's ministry. You can sit next to each other. I don't care if you're paying attention to me at all. Either hold hands, snuggle up next to each other, have this shared experience. I remember Jenny, whenever our kids were little, Jenny was pulling into our driveway, but there's a big ditch, so she has to go out and around. And so the car behind her, as she pulled out and around, gunned it this way and T-boned her, right? And so then he took her to court, believing that it was her fault, even though she was just pulling into her driveway. So Jenny said, hey, will you go to traffic court with me? I said, sure, I'll be happy to go. And in Arkansas, the way they do traffic court is you have to be there at noon, and then they try all the other cases first, and those who are contesting a ticket are the very last. Why? Because they don't want you contesting tickets. So Jenny and I had to sit in traffic court all day long, right? I'll never forget, we were on like the second row, and the row right in front of us, there was these grandparents, people, and they were just running through these cases. You tried meth, 5 years in prison, this suspended. You did this, 5 years, right? I mean, they did this for an hour. And finally, there was this lady that shoplifted. And the judge says, 5 years suspended, and you're banned for a lifetime from Walmart. And the grandmother went, oh, Jesus. Like, I'm dying laughing. 10 years in prison, no response from grandma. Lifetime ban from Walmart. Oh, pray for this person. How in the world are they ever going to make it, right? And so we finally get to the end of the day, and now it's traffic court, and this guy had watched every episode of like Perry Mason or whatever, so he's trying his own case. Then the judge was so patient, and the guy is asking the police officer, you said I had my seatbelt on. You never asked me if I had my seatbelt on. And so how do you know what's actually going on? The judge goes, hey, did you have your seatbelt on? And the guy goes, no, I didn't. She goes, all right, I'm going to add that. And so finally, she's had her patience, and then she just paused and said, hey, Michael, listen, were you behind Miss Thompson on this day? Yes. Did you run into Miss Thompson? Yes. You're guilty. Pay the fine. Jenny and I are walking to the car, and we said, you know what? That's one of our most fun date in years. Sitting in traffic court, why? We didn't get that much time together. That was a very busy season of life. And life gave us this window in which we got to spend a little bit of time together. And it was a gift to us. Steal time. When our kids were little, we used to play hide and seek, parents versus kids. And we would just get time together. All right, kids, y'all go hide first. And we'd sit in the living room knowing about what their attention span was and literally have connection time until we figured we better go start looking for them or they're going to give up. And then we'd go find them. And then we'd say, all right, parents, time to hide. And we would hide just a little bit better than whatever their age appropriate level actually was to give us more time together, right? Steal time, find time. Here's what you need to do. Again, don't forget, first grade, why were you friends? You suffered through it together and you found meaning in it. Do the same thing with parenting. Know that, hey, I'm not in this alone. The book Fearless Families that's out there is our story of our son going through a season of anxiety. And listen, dear friend, I cannot imagine going through that season without Jenny. And we still found these ways to laugh. And they go, ha ha, you got him now. Good luck with that. And we found this unity even in the midst of these very difficult times. If you can find ways to prioritize your friendship in this season of life, you'll build and reap the rewards of that for every season that is to come.
How do you support, encourage, while also staying in your lane when your partner struggles with an addiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, again, you have to, here's what's so difficult about addiction. And my understanding is you have a CR, and I would highly recommend that both parties being involved in that. Here's the real difficulty whenever it comes to this. You love this person greatly, but here's the truth. If they are in the midst of active addiction, they are not married to you, they are married to the drug. And what's difficult is if you're not very careful, you will play the role of the parent as they play the role of the child. And as long as that relationship perpetuates in that way, they are very unlikely to ever get clean and sober. And the only chance they have, not a guarantee, the only chance that they have is for you to respect who they are as a person and allow them to experience the full weight of the consequences for the foolish choices that they are making. Then they have a chance of turning it around. And I don't say that in a judgmental way, and I don't say that in just a surfacey kind of way. I understand the pain with which I am communicating that. But I would not live with an active addict, somebody who is active in adultery, or where abuse is active. Now, I'm not saying you have to get divorced. What I'm saying is I don't feel safe in those scenarios. And to me, there has to be some type of separation. And then they have to figure out, are you going to be married to me or it? And what's difficult and what it means to stay in your lane is, what do you control, but what do you not control? You do not control the decisions that they make. And so you actually don't control whether or not your marriage makes it or not. What you do control is whether or not you're going to give them the best chance to get clean and sober. And here's the thing, love does not always feel loving. It didn't feel loving to my kids when they were little, whenever I took them in to get a shot. But it was the most loving thing that I could do for them. It doesn't feel loving whenever you allow your spouse to experience the full weight of their consequences and to say, I'm not calling into work and telling them you're sick because you were stoned. You get to get fired. And I recognize that means I'm going to suffer too. But if you keep on covering for them, there's no reason for them to change. If you stop and actually allow them to make their own choices and experience the consequences of them, they may or may not, but they actually have a chance to do so. And I don't say that lightly, but again, I would lean on our Celebrate Recovery people here over myself. Go ahead, Jenny.
This was asked many times. My sex drive is higher than my spouse. Is there a way to either decrease mine or increase my spouse's?
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing. Whenever it comes to high drive and low drive, so in our relationship, Jenny has the high drive and I have the low drive when it comes to cleanliness of the house. Right? She's highly driven, me not so much. And this actually plays out in a variety of issues throughout our marriage. Where this question becomes troublesome is whenever we fixate just on one aspect of the relationship in denial of all the other aspects. Okay, how do you negotiate all the other aspects? Well, generally speaking, both of you come to an understanding, and you negotiate it out and try to figure it out. How can we best kind of appease both here? Never in perfection. And so that means I tend to clean a whole lot more than I would ever even think or realize, but it's probably not quite as clean as she would actually like it. Okay, now you switch this into sex. Well, the way that we negotiate it here, now we need to negotiate it over here. And so what does this begin to look like? And here's the truth for most couples is they're really generally not that far off. Let's get to what is the actual difference, and are there ways we can negotiate this? I talk about in Friends, Partners, and Lovers, and this is going to have to be our very end here because we're out of time and I'm not working childcare next week, is in Friends, Partners, and Lovers, I talk about there's 3 types of sex. That we need to have spontaneous sex, which is just like, man, you're hot, let's go. Then we need to have planned sex, which is like, it's Wednesday and there's nothing good on TV, right? And then we need to have maintenance sex, which is, you know what? I don't really need it. You need it? Okay. And if all 3 of those elements aren't involved, then our sex life gets out of whack in some way. But as long as all 3 of those are in a healthy spot, then most of these conversations about frequency can actually be handled in some way. There are these other questions that are at play. Does she feel respected? Does she feel valued? All those kind of things. But generally speaking, on the concept of frequency, if we can mutually pursue after mutual pleasure for the purpose of mutual connection, the differences will really only come down to, once or twice a week that we're working through. And could I have sex once or twice less? Could you have sex once or twice more than you want to? And now we've found this kind of negotiated middle. We're probably in a pretty kind of happy place in those moments. But where frequency is this constant kind of bickering, chances are there's other issues that are actually at play. Hey, what an honor it's been to be with you. I can't wait to be back. Thank y'all so much. Billy?
Hey, Kevin, thank you so much. Let's give Kevin another big round of applause, appreciation.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes,
These 2 minutes are on you, not me. I'm good.
Okay, good. I have 2 minutes. Tell me more about maintenance sex. No, I'm just kidding. I only thought there was one kind of sex. Now you're saying there's 3?
Yes.
I feel like I just tripled up, bro.
There you go. There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, so this guy, what an amazing, just like you are literally amazing, man. This was so
thank
good.
you.
This morning was fantastic, and tonight was terrific. So thank you so much for pouring into us. Jenny, thank you for being here. And these guys are headed back to Sacramento tonight. I think you're going to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
Don't stop in Ashland, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Stop in... but no, we're definitely going to have you back, and
Thank you.
we just so much appreciate
Yeah,
you. So
what an honor. Thank you.
One more time. Let's give Kevin a big hand.
Thank you.
Good job, bro.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to just dismiss, but I'm just going to say a quick prayer over all of us before we exit this room. So, Father, bow your heads, please. Father, we thank you so much for this time. It's just been so tremendously helpful, so much wisdom, and I'm praying for every marriage here in our church, in this room and in our entire church, that you would help us, Lord God, to seek the other spouse's best life in Christ. And Lord, help us to just be a church with strong marriages, with loving marriages that reflect Jesus in all that we do. Lord, bless everyone here. Bless each home. Bless each parent. And we just need you, Jesus, and we love you, and we ask these things in your strong name. And we all said, amen. Amen. All right, everybody, you are dismissed. Don't forget to pick up your kids. We love you guys. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.